The next question, there's a question from Ali from Malaysia, basically from the Gambia. The European Union is putting pressure on the Muslim country, the Gambia, to accept gay and lesbian rights, to do anything they want if they want to marry, etc. Our government is silent over the issue. So can you help us by the help of Allah, because you have voice and many people listen to you? This is a very important question asked by Ali, who is living in Malaysia and is originally from the Gambia. And this is a common practice by many of the powerful countries, mainly the Western countries. They put pressure on the weaker countries to follow their agenda. And one of the pressure they're putting lately is to see to it that they make all the countries, including the Muslim countries, to agree on the concept of homosexuality, to agree with the concept of gay, lesbian, transgender, and to make it legal. And this is common. And we find that they put pressure, economic pressure, they put pressure by business and other pressure. And as far as Gambia is concerned, I've been to Gambia a few times, and Alhamdulillah, I was very close to the earlier president, the previous president of the Gambia, and his name was Dr. Yahya Jammeh. And I spoke to him on this issue, and he asked me this question when I met him the first time in 2014. The first time I met, and he told me that what is your view that the European country are willing to give 30 million euros to Gambia, but the condition is that we should make homosexuality legal. And I told him it is haram. And Alhamdulillah, without batting his idea, that yes, that's what even I consider. And I told them that take your money back. I don't want this money because homosexuality is haram, and I will never make it legal in my country. Alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace, I have met several heads of state, several presidents and prime ministers of various countries and many of the Muslim countries. And some are less close, some are more close. And the previous president of the Gambia, or rather the Islamic Republic of Gambia it was called at this time, he is one of the few heads of states who was very close to me. And whenever I meet the heads of states, I try and give whatever advice I can so that they come closer to Quran, they come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our messenger. And amongst the heads of states, the person who has followed maximum Islamic advice I gave is the previous president of Gambia, Dr. Al-Hajj Yahya Jammeh. And Alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him and may he grant him Jannah. And because he was close to me, many of the Western world were against. And I feel because he followed some of our advice, he was forced to leave his position. And you know that in the last election that took place in 2016 December, and 1 month later that, he was forced to leave his position. And you know how the politics work. All the non-Muslim countries, you know, USA, etc., they got together and they put pressure and they appointed somebody else. And though they call it a democratic election, first of all, they pump in money, they try and rig the election, and they try and remove the person who is Islamic. And they were successful in removing him. He has been ruling, he has been elected as the president for the last 25 years. He was very popular, but they have their ways. And they have done that not only in Gambia, to many countries. Many of the Muslim countries, when they know that the person who is on the chair is more Islamic than the other, they support the opposition and they try and remove him. And if with all the strategies they fail, and yet the person who is more Islamic wins the election, what they do? They do a coup. Very common. And we know lately, a few years back, they did a coup in Turkey. And Alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace, they weren't able to overthrow Erdogan, who is yet, mashallah, he was the prime minister, now is the president of Turkey, mashallah, with Allah's support. So when they find a person who's an Islamic person who wants to bring Islamic change in the country, these Western countries, they get together and they attack economically, socially, by media, and that's what they're doing today. Any Muslim leader who's more Islamic, they attack, and that's what they did to the previous president of Gambia. I'm not saying that he was a very practicing Muslim, he had no faults, I knew him very well, there were faults, but mashallah, compared to many of the other leaders, mashallah, he was a practicing Muslim, mashallah. There were faults in him, and I guided him and gave him many advice, and alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace, most of the advice that I gave, he followed, and maybe that was the reason that he couldn't stay in power in that country. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that these non-Muslim countries who gather together and they try and pressurize the Muslim countries who are weak, as I mentioned earlier in my previous session, all the Muslim countries should unite. How they have a UN or United Nations organization, we should have a United Muslim Organization, UNMO. All the Muslim countries should be united and should be united on the basis of Quran and Sahih Hadith, and see to it that we should be a strong force and we should not let these Western or these non-Muslim countries put pressure and force us to implement what is haram in our country. And there are many Muslims who willingly, just to stay in power, they agree with them, they do haram activities in the country, they are willing to sell their countries as long as they remain in power. So what these Western non-Muslim countries do, they select a Muslim who is secular, they select a Muslim who is not a practicing Muslim, and they support him so that the country can go far away from Islam. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that may He help our Muslim countries so that we can again be the torchbearers of the world.